My mom kicked me out, days after a crash that left me in bed for months. 2 years later, they invited me to their vow renewal and threatened me. I didn't panic. I did this. Their deal stalled. Then my mom saw everything. I was 18 when a pickup hit my rear bumper at the start of our street. Not a highway, not traffic, just a normal New Jersey suburb. Saturday morning, an empty road, my mom's car, me at the wheel, practicing parallel parking before my DMV test in a few days. I'd asked permission in advance. Our house had a strict rule: ask at least one parent. Mom was at the office. She ran marketing at a small consulting firm and was almost always on. I popped into the kitchen to Greg, my stepdad. Can I? 15 minutes. Around the block, a couple of park-ups and back. Greg barely lifted his eyes from his phone. Sure. Just be careful. And I think he even tossed, "Don't bring us a police report," and smirked. I nodded and left. 10 minutes later, the sound hit like someone slammed doors inside my chest. The world folded into the white burst of the airbag and the gritty foam dust. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking so hard the numbers jumped. 911, the operator's voice. Where are you? Any injuries? Sirens. Then, ER, a plastic wristband, light in my eyes. Rate the pain from 0 to 10. 8. X-ray, CT scan. No surgical injuries showing, but... Then the orders. Strict bed rest. NSAIDs. Physical therapy in 3 to 4 weeks. The doctor was precise. A nurse rolled my gurney to the car. Our Blue Cross plan covered most of it. We'd handle the deductible later. Mom, of course, showed up. 2 hours later, after an urgent meeting. She listened carefully, nodded, took everything down in notes. Greg drove us home, put me on the couch, turned on a humidifier, set water and pain meds on the table. Rest, he said, like that was all that mattered to him. Then came months I remember like someone else's winter. I couldn't really roll over. Every motion was a sheet of pain. For 3 months, I barely stood up, only to the bathroom and back, with Mom or Greg under my elbow. We lived in a 1-story house. That should help, right? Even the walk from the living room to the bathroom felt like an expedition. On weekends, the PT showed me how to sit and stand without swimming the room, and how to trust my legs again. Pills shimmered in the organizer. Ibuprofen, muscle relaxants, something stronger at night so I wouldn't wake up every time I turned. The day of the crash, I replayed it like an edit I could fix. I had asked. That kept me afloat. I hadn't broken any rules. I called Mom from the ambulance while a medic locked my neck brace. Greg was home then. He picked me up from the hospital and carried me to the living room like I was small again. The next day, the police came to the house. Forms, the case number, they needed my statement. In front of Mom, I told the officer how I pulled onto an empty street and the truck hit me from behind. He nodded, wrote it down, asked about witnesses. I named the neighbor across the way. She'd been on her porch and saw the lights. I was still scared. For a week, I walked the hall with a lump in my throat and my phone in my hand, rereading Mom's "Hang in there" and the faint, "Greg and I are here." A week later, the lump turned to stone. Mom came into the room. No planner now, face I hadn't seen since teenage fights. She stood at the door. He stood just behind her, arms crossed. "We need to talk," Mom said. "Okay," I said, shifting into a position that didn't light me on fire. "Greg says you didn't ask," she said, flat, like a board meeting. "What?" I stared at him. Greg held my eyes calmly, then shrugged. "I was out back." I didn't say anything. "I didn't know." "You lied," I breathed. "I went into the kitchen and asked." "You said sure." "You even joked. Just no police reports." "Enough." Mom raised her hand. "He would never say that." "Mom, I'm telling the truth. I felt the shake in my voice. I didn't go to any party. I didn't even leave our neighborhood. I just wanted to practice parallel parking, like you told me to. She shook her head. The neighbors heard you talking about a party. Greg said you, she swallowed, wanted to impress people. Do you understand how you embarrassed me? Embarrassed. The word punched my chest. The car is insured, Mom, I managed. It's covered. It's not about the money, she said, and she was right. It's about you lying. We talked for a week. In reality, hissed and half-whispered because I couldn't shout without pain, and they didn't want the neighbors to hear. I told the same sequence over and over. I asked Greg. He said yes. And whatever I said, they didn't hear. Greg, with a child's solemnity, said, "Let's not make this worse," and pleaded for peace in the house. Mom repeated, "Your truth is not fact," and "I need calm." On the 5th or 6th day, I snapped. "If calm is what you want, what are we even doing here?" I said. "You just want me to disappear." "Nobody wants you to disappear," she answered, and glanced toward where he stood. "Except him," I said. "He did this." He lied. "And you chose him." An hour later, she came back, this time without Greg, and said, "You'll live with Grandma and Grandpa. It's better for everyone. We'll help with medical bills. I can't stand between you two anymore. I need the house to be calm. I convinced myself it's for all our sakes." My mom's parents lived 10 minutes away, Nancy and Frank Miller. They were the kind of grown-ups are supposed to be when a kid falls into a hole. Nancy was already at the porch when we pulled up. Frank held the door and muttered under his breath, "Susan, how could you?" Mom cut in, "We'll pay for everything." It's hard for us right now, too. She was precise, as always. Insurance, a bed upgrade, a day nurse for 12 hours. Precision. Her second skin. There was no warmth in that skin. Then rehab. With neighbors' help and Nancy's, we set up PT, a bedside commode, grab bars in the shower. Insurance covered the course. I learned to walk the house again. Everything hurt, even my eyelashes. But you can build a schedule on pain disciplines. I learned to measure progress in inches, from the bed rail to the lamp to the window. In that house, I was a guest. For the first time in years, that wasn't scary. On Nancy and Frank's dresser were frames with my childhood pictures, me as a snowflake in a cotton costume, me grinning with missing teeth. Their fridge had Greek yogurt and blueberries, my favorites. Frank built a railing board along the hall. Nancy sat me at the table, sliced strawberries, and said, "You're home, honey. We'll handle the logistics. You just heal Greg didn't come. 2 weeks, no call. Then a dry, 'How are you?' and a waving hand emoji. I typed fine, and the chat died. People asked if I wanted him to hear the truth from me. I nodded and said nothing. Inside, everything was flat, like some breaker flipped. Danger. Sleep. Wait. While I learned to shuffle to the kitchen, FAFSA did its slow grind. Grandma and Grandpa insisted I not drop college, even though I was ready to cross it all out. They drove me to campus, bought a used laptop off Facebook Marketplace, set up my dorm with IKEA shelves and a warm lamp so your eyes don't ache. I started again, from zero, with zeros in my account, but with people who actually put me first. 2 years passed. 1 year left till graduation. My back tugged in the evenings, my legs ached before rain, but I held what I built myself. And in that myself, there was more peace than in all the "we're family" speeches I'd been fed in our old house. Neither Mom nor Greg called or wrote in that time, until an email came, from her. Subject line, "Important invitation." Too cheerful, she wrote that she and Greg were going to renew their vows. In 2 weeks, she would love me to be there. Greg would reach out formally anyway, and she was sure I would accept. I replied no, short, no explanation. She wrote again immediately. I was required to attend because it wasn't just a family night. Mom would have partners there. They knew she had a daughter. They've seen the photos on her desk. It would be awkward to explain why I didn't show for something so important. She added that Mom had already planned to reach out and make peace, and I just needed to say yes and forget the past. I wasn't ready to forget. It had only been 2 years. In my head, I could still see Mom standing in my doorway saying, "This is better for everyone," and Greg nodding in the hall. I didn't answer. 2 hours later, she wrote again. The tone changed. "I always knew you were ungrateful." Here you go again, showing how low you can go. And at the very moment she is trying to fix things, even though you don't deserve it. Then the threats. If I didn't come, I could forget any inheritance. No business, no money from Greg. You'll see none of it. I'll personally make sure she really thought that would scare me. I hit block in iMessage. I'd blocked them on social long ago and left the numbers, like that mattered. Now I blocked the phones too. I thought that was the end. It wasn't. Soon my university email pinged, from her again. Vows are part of Mom's work. She really wants you there. Even there she couldn't apologize. They needed me for their picture, and still she pressed and demanded like she was doing me a favor. I decided I would not back down. I gathered screenshots of our texts. That evening I sat with my laptop, opened my profile, and wrote a post. No theatrics, just facts. What happened 2 years ago? What was happening now? I attached image after image, made the post public, tagged Mom, Greg, and a handful of her colleagues, the ones whose names weren't hard to find on LinkedIn and in public profiles. Yes, it was on purpose. If, like Mom said, the night is half business, let business see what it costs to stage an ideal family photo. I didn't expect anything to happen. It felt like a period at the end of a sentence. The next day, Grandma called. Her voice shook. "She's in shock, honey." A pause. "She says you blew up their deal." They were about to merge with another company. Early talks. Everything at the term sheet stage. Now, silence. I had tagged members of the board, and the wave rolled through feeds, chats, mailing lists. Reputation is fragile. In my post, Mom did not look her best, and that hit the people who were used to seeing her as flawless. They say the merger is now in doubt. She can't get responses from the people she'd been negotiating with, and she thinks it's my fault. Grandma and Grandpa said maybe I went too far, that I shouldn't have dragged Mom and Greg into it publicly, that the real villain was Greg, and I put everyone under fire. I felt awkward that they saw it that way. They've always been my shelter, and their doubt felt like cold water on hot skin. But I know why I did it. Because 2 years ago I was the one chosen last. Because I lay in my post-trauma hole while my mom and her husband argued about how to look better. Because they wanted my silent consent for their pretty picture. Now they wanted my presence. For me to stand between them under string lights and keep quiet, so on Monday they could show the photo to partners and say, "We're fine." Maybe it really is just business. Maybe that's how it works in their world. 2 years ago, I learned different math. If family calls you only for a photo, it isn't family. It's PR. And no NDA, no right script is worth giving yourself again to someone who already once looked at your pain and said, "I need calm." I closed the laptop and pressed my forehead to my knees. My hands stopped shaking. I was scared and felt strange. But under that fear, something steady and quiet said, I did the right thing. Sometimes I still catch myself calling Mom and Greg parents, and it always grates. The explanation is simple. It's what I said all my life. Parents, as a pair of words without any precision. Biologically, Mom. Greg has been around since I was 4. I got used to the shorthand, not to what stood behind it. It means nothing. It certainly doesn't mean the kind of love they like to claim in front of others. After the post, I deleted it and unblocked Mom, not out of fear, but to be able to write to her. Reposts were already rolling through feeds. Tags were shooting into corporate chats and inboxes. Screenshots flew farther than I planned. I didn't apologize. I explained. Wrote what had been looping in my head for 2 years. I didn't know about a potential merger at her company. Didn't know it was a big bet for her team and her role. I didn't want to hit her work. I wanted to protect myself. 2 years ago, they threw me out when I could barely walk to the door, and now that they called me, they weren't calling me. They were calling a picture to convince outsiders that our family was fine. Greg's blunt pressure was openly insulting. I wrote, "That's why I made the post. To stop it. To avoid becoming a silent prop between them again." Honestly, I didn't expect a response. I figured Mom would blow up or go quiet and pass it to lawyers for an NDA, their favorite. But she answered, wrote that she understood why she got hit, that she wasn't blaming me, that she accepted, as a human, how I reacted. It sounded oddly patient, and I called Grandma and Grandpa almost at once. If anyone knew the real landscape, it was them. They said something I didn't expect to hear. Mom had been regretting this for a long time. They'd been working on it for months, talking to her, trying to shake her off the standby screen, explaining what actually happened. Turns out pushing me out was her call. Greg lied convincingly, and she chose house peace over figuring it out. 2 weeks after that day, she started to doubt herself and him. She didn't voice it because doubt would require admitting an error. She didn't have the courage. Grandma said in recent months they'd been talking with Mom about a meeting, that Mom wanted to invite me to the vow renewal, not for show, not for business, but to really make peace. No partners were ever invited. That was Greg's lie. He kept pushing the old line. She's ungrateful. She'll ruin it again. Instead of calling me earlier, Mom once again braced herself on his version. Now, after my post, it had become a crisis. She saw the screenshots, and the gap between her and Greg tore open into a rip that may not mend. Grandma and I talked a long time. I didn't pretend I knew what I felt. In some ways, life was easier when they were simply removed. No calls, no new wounds. But I couldn't ignore how happy Grandma and Grandpa were. I had reached out. I had at least written and explained. It wasn't an apology or a surrender. It was me trying to put an end to our stalemate and start clean. They said they were proud I found the words and sent the message. Mom wrote again, brief. She said she was ready to talk anytime, any place. I asked her to come to Grandma and Grandpa's. A door that didn't spike my pulse. We picked the nearest evening that worked. I prepared the way I did for my first step after the hospital, carefully, respecting possible pain. I wrote down boundaries, what I won't discuss, what I won't allow, what I'll stop if it turns into she said, he said. I rehearsed answers. No, not now. Let's not rewrite the past. On paper, it all looked calm. Inside, everything shook. She arrived on time. Came in, took off her coat, and paused in the doorway like someone who knows her presence is not guaranteed. Nancy hugged her first. Frank nodded. Then Mom turned to me. She apologized from the first line, not for communication, not for process failures, for actions. I failed as a mother, she said. I chose the easy version of the truth because I was afraid to face the difficult one. I let Greg speak for me. I didn't come to you when you couldn't stand up. It's inexcusable. It was hard to listen, and somehow easy. Inside, it felt like someone was finally pulling the tight frame apart. I said I didn't believe she was entirely a bad mother. That would be untrue too. As a kid, she really did raise me mostly alone because Greg didn't like to stick to kid stuff. She drove me to activities, paid for camps, sat with me at the kitchen table over math, and pretended not to see when I cried. All of that happened, but the last years happened too, just as real. I don't know how those two truths glue into one life. Mom nodded. She didn't defend herself. She told me exactly how Greg steered her, how he always picked the moment when I was vulnerable, how he handed her ready explanations. She lied again. She always does it her way. How he slipped in half-truths easier to accept than verify. She said she wasn't trying to shed responsibility. She made the decisions. She put me at the door. She failed to come later. And now, if I was willing to think about anything at all, she needed my boundary and my rule. If you say no, it will be no. If you say later, it will be later. She didn't expect me to forgive right away or go back to how it was. Before looked pretty in pictures and was bad for me. We were not going back there. Then she said the thing I wasn't ready to hear so soon. She was divorcing Greg. When she saw my screenshots of his threats and lies about partners at the vow renewal, they fought. He tried to play it as I overdid it, said it wrong. She pressed him to the facts, and he admitted it. 2 years ago, he lied too. He knew I asked permission. He had said yes. He dropped the no police reports joke, then wiped those words away when he realized how to twist them. I can't live with someone who stands next to me while I make choices like that, Mom said. And there was more anger at herself than at him. I didn't make promises. I said I needed time. She nodded, just as she had when a doctor told me, another month of bed rest. We agreed to try talking without third parties. An hour on our laptops, a call without blame. If it goes sideways, we call Grandma and she cuts it off if the tone slips. We won't discuss Greg until Mom finishes the legal process. We won't discuss what if, because it doesn't exist. We will discuss what is. In the hallway, I heard Frank set the kettle down and drop the lid. His little whoops, such a familiar sound, made me feel for a second like the kitchen could heal more than bodies. The next few days, I lived in quiet. For the first time in 2 years, quiet wasn't a punishment. I thought about what I'd written. What would be enough for me to let Mom back in? What I can never do again. First of all, hand myself over to somebody else's picture. We traded a few more messages. Mom wrote that she was ready for therapy together. I thought, and said yes. Sometimes you need a third ear so you don't come apart. We booked next week, a clinic near campus, in network on my plan. Nancy and Frank cheered so hard it was silly and sweet. That's how you do it, honey. Grown up, not Facebook. As for the merger, there's still no answer. Mom thinks they'll likely delay it or quietly cancel. Right now she cares more about this, sorting out her life and building the minimum trust with me again. She said she'd accept any decision I make, even if, a month from now, I need the silent mode again. Your life is not my project, she said. That may have been the most important line of all. That night I pulled a wide envelope from the closet. The one with my hospital discharge papers, PT plans, photos from the months I hate to look at. It hit me that the body I called mine back then isn't mine anymore. It taught me one rule. The people who are there when it's worst are the people who are family. Everything else can change. Last names, addresses, company logos, and that rule stays. I don't know if we'll do well. I don't know how much let's try I still have in me. I only know my boundary is finally visible. To everyone. And to me, if we go forward, it won't be in their house, not under string lights for other people. It'll be in an ordinary therapist's office where instead of a pretty picture, you get a paper tissue and someone says, "Let's say that again." On the day we set therapy, I woke too early, stepped onto Grandma and Grandpa's porch, and realized for the first time in a long time. I wasn't waiting to be hit. It's a strange feeling, like the short leg on a chair finally got fixed. My phone held no new threats from Greg, and won't, because I've blocked him everywhere. It had a short "see you" from Mom, and then silence. At school, between classes, I ducked into the library, opened a blank doc, and typed, "Am I ready to forgive? Yes, if we have a new coordinate system." Below that, "Am I ready to walk if they break it again?" Also, yes. And I put a period. Sometimes a period is all we need to start a new line. Not a headline, not a manifesto, just a line where there aren't other people's words instead of yours. Where parents isn't a convenient label, but the people who actually do what they're supposed to do. Where you don't choose silence because it's safer for them. Where your knees don't shake at someone else's, "This will be better for everyone." I'm 20, a year to go, then a diploma. After that, work, my first health plan, my first lease without any second signature. It sounds bold, maybe too confident. It's my life. And in it, I finally get to set one rule. If someone wants a photo, they earn their place in the frame. With words, with actions, with time. Not threats. Not someone else's script. Not a vacant invitation for show. For now, therapy on Wednesdays. Grandma and Grandpa calls on Fridays. No to any attempt by Greg to reach me through mutuals. And one quiet yes to myself. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment with your thoughts. See you in the next video.